No one touches my daughter when I'm not here, especially not you. The words cracked through the steam like a whip. Maya Williams froze, one hand cupping the back of little Sophia Whitman's head, the other steadying a washcloth that trailed warm water along the child's tiny shoulders. The porcelain tub gleamed under the skylight. The late Palo Alto sun poured in at a slant, turning the mist to gold. Sophia's curls were wet and shining, her cheeks flushed with the faint heat that had worried Maya enough to draw a shallow bath just warm. Just safe, nothing more. Sophia startled at the voice, eyes wide, breath hitching. Her small palm reached out, the fingers opening and closing toward Maya's collar as if grasping for an invisible rope. Ethan Caldwell filled the doorway in his navy suit, tie loose, jaw rigid. He was all angles and shadow against the light, 40 years old, every inch the man who had built an empire by deciding faster than the next person. But now something raw flickered beneath the authority, the startled terror of a parent caught off guard by intimacy with his child that he hadn't sanctioned or expected. "Mr. Caldwell," Maya said softly, keeping her voice at the level that soothed infants and skittish dogs and grieving adults. Sophia ran warm. "I used a quick rinse to bring her comfort. I'll have her out in a minute." "Who told you to do that?" His voice was low, measured, more dangerous than a shout. Maya didn't flinch. "No one." She was uncomfortable. "It's a light sponge. Get your hands off my daughter." Sophia let out a small, wounded sound, a hiccup of protest that made Maya's chest tighten. "It's okay, Jellybean," Maya whispered, sliding the towel up and lifting the toddler with practiced care. The towel swallowed Sophia, only curls and damp lashes visible. The child's fist clutched Maya's shirt, clung to the familiarity of a heartbeat she recognized. Ethan stepped forward and took Sophia into his arms. The transfer was careful, but the break in contact set off a burst of sobs. The towel trembled against his suit. Moisture beaded and slid down expensive wool. He tried to hold the way he'd seen done before, but the child kept twisting toward Maya, keening quietly. "Ma." "Yeah." The name hung in the air like a bell that refused to stop ringing. "Pack your things," Ethan said to Maya without looking. "Away from his daughter, you're done here." It struck her like a sudden cold draft. Still, Maya nodded. She turned off the faucet, spiraled the washcloth on the edge of the tub, wiped a small crescent of water from the floor with her bare foot. She tucked stray curls under the towel's hood and, not trusting her voice, touched two fingers to the dimple above Sophia's wrist, a secret little goodbye. The child wouldn't understand, but would feel. "I didn't mean to overstep," Maya said at last. "I meant to help." Ethan's mouth tightened. "This house has rules for a reason." Maya offered no defense. Dignity was the one thing she could carry out of any room. She took a breath that steadied her spine and walked past him into the hall, the scent of baby shampoo and cedar cabinets trailing after her. In the mirror by the doorway, she caught a glimpse of herself, damp forearms, a stray curl stuck to her cheek, eyes clear. She'd learned long ago that clarity didn't keep you employed, but it kept you whole. The house beyond the bathroom was an echoing museum of money-sunlit corridors, curated art, glass vases that dared you to breathe. Near them, she moved through it in a straight line to the mudroom, gloves and shoes in their precise places. Everything labeled. At the back door, she paused and let her hand rest on the handle until her pulse eased. Outside, the evening had turned a deep, quiet blue. The oaks along the drive rustled. Somewhere a lawn sprinkler hissed and clicked. As the gate slid open, Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket, her text from an unknown number. "You can't outrun forever." The words crawled under her skin, old and unwelcome. She lifted her gaze to the base of the hill. Parked along the curb, just beyond the property line, sat a dark sedan. Its windshield reflected the sky, the glass a mirror that hid what was inside. The engine idled, or didn't, she couldn't tell. A silhouette shifted. Or maybe it was nothing but her nerves assigning movement to shadow. Maya swallowed. She exhaled slowly, silenced the phone, and slid it back into her pocket as if pressing the message back into the past where it belonged. She walked down the drive with the posture she reserved for difficult rooms, not defiant, not afraid, simply present. The gate closed behind her with a final, expensive whisper. Back inside. Ethan turned his daughter toward the mirror above the bathroom sink, tried to smile. "Hey," he murmured, bouncing gently. Sophia burrowed into his shoulder, muffling a whimper in the silk of his tie. Her forehead was warm, no longer alarming, but enough to make his mind run a frantic inventory of what he should do. He carried her to her room, the walls painted in pale peaches and creams, the mobile of tiny birds carving shadows across the ceiling. Everything was orderly. Everything was right. and yet nothing felt simple. He dressed her quickly, clumsy with the small buttons, then sat in the rocker with her cradled in his lap. He had seen Maria do this, Maria with her low hum and steady hands, bending the world quiet for a child. He looked at the rocker as if it might lend him that grace. His body remembered the motion. His mind did not remember the music. "It's okay, Soph," he said. "It's okay," she answered with a hiccuping sob. He reached for the bottle of water on the nightstand, tried to coax her into a sip. Her lips pressed tight. He followed the script of things he'd read, and half-remembered cool cloth on the forehead, light blanket, dim room. Sophia settled for a minute, then restlessness returned, small feet pushing against his thigh, fingers worrying the ear of a stuffed rabbit until the seam squeaked. Ethan stood, paced the length of the room, and then the hall when the room proved too narrow for his anxiety. The house was hushed. His shoes tapped softly on the hardwood. He could feel the place where the life he'd known had cracked. An invisible fissure running from the bathroom threshold, through the nursery and out, into the corridors of his own chest. He'd built a company by anticipating problems before they arrived. He had not anticipated what to do with a toddler's heat against his neck and the ache that came with hearing another adult's name on her lips. He paused at the top of the stairs and looked down the long spine of the house toward the front door. The world outside had gone purple, then indigo. He pictured Maya's back receding down the drive, that measured walk. He could still smell the faint sweetness of shampoo where she had been standing a few minutes earlier. He felt, with sudden clarity, that he had sent away a solution he didn't understand out of a fear he wouldn't name. Sophia's breath warmed the hollow below his collarbone. He returned to the rocker and tried again, shifting her so her cheek rested on his chest. Her lashes fluttered, damp and heavy. He kept his voice low, searching for a rhythm. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're with me." The words sounded truer than they felt. On the dresser, a framed photo lay face up. Maria in the garden holding Sophia as an infant, his own arm draped behind them like an afterthought. He picked it up, and the weight of the glass steadied his hands. Maria's smile in that captured moment had been soft and knowing, as if she'd seen farther down the road than he had. He set the frame down carefully, an altar to a life that wouldn't return. When Sophia drifted closer to sleep, he reached for the small bottle of children's medicine the pediatrician had recommended months ago. He shook it gently, measured out a dose, and touched the plastic spoon to her lower lip. She turned her face away, chin-locking, hands pushing the spoon with surprising strength. A thin stripe of syrup streaked his knuckle. He tried again, patient, murmuring nonsense syllables the way he'd heard other parents do. She clenched her jaw. The stubbornness was pure Caldwell, and something like pride and fear rose in him at the same time. He set the spoon back on the nightstand and rubbed his thumb over the sticky smear. Annoyed with himself for the wash of helplessness that followed, he wasn't used to problems that didn't bend. The light outside faded toward true night. The nursery lamp pulled a golden circle on the rug, catching the curve of a wooden block, the ear of the rabbit, the gloss on his dress shoes. From somewhere in the house, the climate system sighed and settled. Ethan listened to his daughter's small body fight for a comfort she hadn't yet found. He tried to become still enough that she could borrow his calm. Just when her breathing slowed, the fever itch nipped again. She wriggled, damp eyes shining in the low light. She didn't cry this time. She simply looked up at him, searching, and he felt the question inside that looked like a hand on his chest. Do you know how he kissed her hair? He didn't know. Not really. He could guess, he could try, he could stay. Down the hill, a pair of headlights drifted past the property and then paused, as if the driver had forgotten something. The beams slid across the curtains and disappeared. In Maya's pocket, miles away, a phone sat dark and silent, a message sleeping inside it like a seed. Ethan rocked. The chair creaked. The rabbit's ear squeaked once and became quiet. The night gathered itself around the house and held it. Forehead burned warm against his palm. The tiny refusal of the spoon sat between them like a riddle he couldn't solve. For the first time since he'd ordered Maya out of his home, Ethan felt the shape of what he lacked, not wealth or walls, but the practice of soothing. He breathed, counted, and listened to the fragile measure of his daughter's breaths, aware that morning would demand an answer he did not yet have. Outside, the garden went to sleep. Inside, the clock in the hallway ticked toward an hour when decisions get made. And upstairs, in the nursery's dim glow, a father held his child and stared into the quiet he had created, not yet ready to admit how much he needed to learn. He lasted until dawn by counting the rise and fall of his daughter's breath. When the first pale square of light slid across the nursery rug, Ethan Caldwell was still in the rocker with Sophia. Whitman curled to his chest, both of them smelling faintly of shampoo and stubbornness. Her fever had eased, then teased back, as if the night couldn't make up its mind. He kept his voice low and steady, a metronome he hoped she could borrow. By mid-morning, he'd done everything the pediatric advice line suggested: a cool cloth, tiny sips of water, patience. It helped in moments and then dissolved. When Sophia finally slept, it was a thin, restless doze. Ethan read and reread the notes he'd taken during the call, as if a different order of the same words might become a cure. Saturday was a stutter. He called the agency and brought in a temporary nanny for the afternoon, a woman with good references and a bright, practiced tone. She made herself small, kind, efficient. Sophia took one look and clung to Ethan's leg with the ferocity of a barnacle. When the woman knelt, Sophia turned her face to the side and pressed her cheek to Ethan's trousers. Breath hitching, one hand splayed open in the air as if warding off a wave. "She warm up," the nanny assured him, undiscouraged. She tried a picture book, a soft song, a spoon. The child's body remained a question mark bent against Ethan's knee. The nanny stayed an hour, then two, then left with apologetic eyes and a promise to return if needed. Sophia cried herself into an exhausted nap. When she woke, she mumbled something that sounded like not a full name so much as the shape of a need. Sunday blurred. Ethan took Sophia for a slow drive down leafy streets in an attempt to lull her. The car seat made her drowsy but wary, eyes flicking open whenever he slowed. He remembered Maria's old trick, perking under a tree where light dappled and casting a soft loop of classical music, and tried it. The music worked for exactly 1 minute and 27 seconds. After that, Sophia's gaze searched the rear window like a compass needle seeking true north. That night, he tried another temporary caregiver. Younger, more animated, she brought a basket of finger puppets and a bag of patience. Sophia watched, the puppets with damp lashes and an expression that said it might as well be moonlight. When the caregiver reached to take her, Sophia's mouth trembled. Ethan stepped between them without thinking, surprised by the reflex. "I'll take it from here," he said, and in the quiet after the door closed, he broke a rule he'd held since the funeral. He took Maria's journal down from the high shelf. It was the cloth-bound one she kept for the first year of Sophia's life, the one that had felt too alive to touch. He set it on the desk, fingers hovering a long beat before opening. The pages smelled like linen and ink, and a summer he thought would never end. Sophia, week 10, read one entry. "You hate the quiet between 2 and 4 a.m., and you love the sound of running water." Another, "Ethan thinks calm is a talent. It isn't. It's a practice you do for someone you love." He read until the words blurred. Practice. The word slid into a place that had been locked. He closed the journal gently, not as an ending but as a promise, if not to be Maria, then at least to enter the habit of trying. On Monday he worked from home and stayed within arm's reach. 40 emails went unanswered, 2 calls with investors rerouted. He watched the way Sophia's body stiffened whenever the house felt too big, and tried to make himself small enough to be a room. Tuesday, Thomas Green gave him the look that, over the years, had kept Ethan from several catastrophes. They met in the study, a place designed for certainty. Today, certainty was a rumor. "You're not sleeping," Thomas observed, not unkindly. "Neither is she," Ethan said. Thomas waited a long second. "I know where Maya lives," he said finally. "HR had it on file. I did not bring it to you Friday night because I was weighing whether this would be help or dependency. I am still weighing, but I keep thinking of what Mrs. Caldwell wrote once, about practice." Ethan watched a drop of afternoon sun creep across the floorboard toward Thomas's shoes. "Give me the address." Thomas held his gaze. "On one condition: when she comes, you let her set the terms. You'll be the father, not the client." Something like a smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth and failed. "Agreed." Wednesday evening, the light over Palo Alto turned the edges of things soft. The city's hum was gentle, the kind that made you believe everyone you loved was on their way home. Ethan drove across town to a modest building with a staircase that had learned every footfall that ever climbed it. He paused on the landing, outside apartment to be, and, because habit was sticky, checked his phone. A new email sat at the top of his inbox. No subject line, no sender he recognized. Just a single line in the preview: "Don't trust her." He stared at it for a beat that felt a shade too long. Then he locked the screen and slid the phone into his jacket. The choices that matter rarely wait until you feel brave. Maya opened the door before he knocked a second time. She wore a slate cardigan and jeans, hair pulled back, eyes level. The place behind her was neat in the way of people who had learned to clean up after storms. A plant on the windowsill leaned toward the last of the sun. I didn't think you'd come, she said quietly. I didn't think I'd need to, he admitted, and then winced at the arrogance baked into the sentence. She won't settle. Not for me. Not for anyone. Maya nodded once. Is she warm? On and off, the line said. It's normal. It doesn't feel normal. It never does when you're the parent, Maya said. She grabbed a tote already half-packed thermometer, wipes, a small bottle of lotion, a worn cloth that had learned the map of a small forehead. If I come back, it says Sophia's caregiver. I set the routine. I put her needs ahead of your schedule, and ahead of anyone's comfort. You are her father. I won't replace you. But I won't be a secret, either. If that's a problem, say so now. Ethan absorbed it, weighed it, and found himself relieved by the firmness. It isn't a problem, he said. It's the point. They didn't speak much on the drive. Silence was its own contract. He glanced once at her profile, the way she looked out the window as if memorizing the route for later, a professional documenting a new job site. When they turned up the winding drive, the Oaks seemed to hold their breath. Inside, the house was dim and unsettled, as if it had been waiting, too. Ethan led her straight to the nursery. The air smelled like sleep that hadn't happened yet. Was sitting up in her crib, hair sticking damp to her forehead, the rabbit clutched like a passport. The child's eyes moved to the doorway and stopped. Maya didn't rush. She stepped into the room and let Sophia see her fully, as if introducing herself anew. She crouched to the child's height and spoke in that small, even register that had soothed 100 worries. Hey Strawberry, she said. Long day. Sophia's mouth opened. No cry came out, only a shiver of relief that looked like the end of a storm. She reached, the gesture unadorned, urgent, all trust. Maya set her tote down and held out her arms. Slow, Ethan whispered without knowing why. I know, Maya answered, and lifted the child as if lifting a promise she meant to keep. It was a simple thing. The way Sophia's body arranged itself. Along Maya's shoulder tuck, a sigh, a lettinger. The fever heat seemed to loosen. The rabbit slid to the floor without protest. Maya rubbed small circles between the child's shoulder blades, humming something that might have been a lullaby or might have been the sound of safety. Ethan stood a step back, hands empty, and watched the invisible architecture of calm assemble itself right in front of him. There was nothing magical about it, and that was what undid him. It was skill, yes, practice, yes, but more than that, it was presence. Maya did not try to make Sophia different. She made the room different, and the child did the rest. Maya glanced over her shoulder. We'll keep it simple, she murmured. Dim the lights, a few sips, no new demands. He did as she asked, grateful to be told what to do for once. He dimmed the lamp, fetched the water, and took his place at the edge of the moment like a student in the right class at last. Sophia's breathing lengthened. The hum in the room shifted to a lower, happier key. Maya pressed her cheek to the child's hair and smiled into it, small and private. The way people smile at a sunrise only they can see. In the hallway, a new email arrived in Ethan's inbox, unnoticed. The subject line was as blank as the last. Don't trust her. It read again, as if repetition could make a truth. The phone on his hip vibrated once and went quiet. Sophia's hand opened and closed against Maya's shoulder. A reflex that softened, and then stopped. Her lashes stilled. The clock across the hall ticked once, twice. Ethan felt the tension that had been clenched in his own neck begin to unspool strand by stubborn strand. He exhaled, and what came out surprised him, a sound that might have been gratitude. Maya didn't look up, didn't ask for praise. She did what she had come to do. She shifted Sophia to the crib with the gentleness of tidewater, kept one palm on the child's back for 3 slow breaths, then 2 more for good measure. When she straightened, the room seemed to right itself, the way pictures tilt back into plumb after a passing truck. Ethan met her eyes. On Monday, he worked from home and stayed within arm's reach. 40 emails went unanswered, 2 calls with investors rerouted. He watched the way Sophia's body stiffened whenever the house felt too big, and tried to make himself small enough to be a room. Tuesday, Thomas Green gave him the look that, over the years, had kept Ethan from several catastrophes. They met in the study, a place designed for certainty. Today, certainty was a rumor. You're not sleeping, Thomas observed, not unkindly. Neither is she, Ethan said. Thomas waited a long second. I know where Maya lives, he said finally. HR had it on file. I did not bring it to you Friday night because I was weighing whether this would be help or dependency. I am still weighing, but I keep thinking of what Mrs. Caldwell wrote once, about practice. Ethan watched a drop of afternoon sun creep across the floorboard toward Thomas's shoes. Give me the address. Thomas held his gaze. On one condition: when she comes, you let her set the terms. You'll be the father, not the client. Something like a smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth and failed. Agreed. Wednesday evening, the light over Palo Alto turned the edges of things soft. The city's hum was gentle, the kind that made you believe everyone you loved was on their way home. Ethan drove across town to a modest building with a staircase that had learned every footfall that ever climbed it. He paused on the landing, outside apartment to be, and, because habit was sticky, checked his phone. A new email sat at the top of his inbox. No subject line, no sender he recognized. Just a single line in the preview: don't trust her. He stared at it for a beat that felt a shade too long, then he locked the screen and slid the phone into his jacket. The choices that matter rarely wait until you feel brave. Maya opened the door before he knocked a second time. She wore a slate cardigan and jeans, hair pulled back, eyes level. The place behind her was neat in the way of people who had learned to clean up after storms. A plant on the windowsill leaned toward the last of the sun. I didn't think you'd come, she said quietly. I didn't think I'd need to, he admitted, and then winced at the arrogance baked into the sentence. She won't settle, not for me, not for anyone. Maya nodded once. Is she warm, on and off? The line said it's normal. It doesn't feel normal. It never does when you're the parent, Maya said. She grabbed a tote already half-packed thermometer, wipes, a small bottle of lotion, a worn cloth that had learnt the map of a small forehead. If I come back, it's as Sophia's caregiver. I set the routine. I put her needs ahead of your schedule, and ahead of anyone's comfort. You are her father. I won't replace you. But I won't be a secret either, if that's a problem. Say so now. Ethan absorbed it, weighed it, and found himself relieved by the firmness. It isn't a problem, he said. It's the point. They didn't speak much on the drive. Silence was its own contract. He glanced once at her profile, the way she looked out the window as if memorizing the route for later, a professional documenting a new job site. When they turned up the winding drive, the Oaks seemed to hold their breath. Inside, the house was dim and unsettled, as if it had been waiting to. Ethan led her straight to the nursery. The air smelled like sleep that hadn't happened yet. Was sitting up in her crib, hair sticking damp to her forehead, the rabbit clutched like a passport. The child's eyes moved to the doorway and stopped. Maya didn't rush. She stepped into the room and let Sophia see her fully, as if introducing herself anew. She crouched to the child's height and spoke in that small, even register that had soothed 100 worries. Hey, Strawberry, she said. Long day. Sophia's mouth opened. No cry came out, only a shiver of relief that looked like the end of a storm. She reached, the gesture unadorned, urgent, all trust. Maya set her tote down and held out her arms slow. Ethan whispered without knowing why. I know, Maya answered, and lifted the child as if lifting a promise she meant to keep. It was a simple thing, the way Sophia's body arranged itself. Along Maya's shoulder tuck, a sigh, a letting go. The fever heat seemed to loosen. The rabbit slid to the floor without protest. Maya rubbed small circles between the child's shoulder blades, humming something that might have been a lullaby or might have been the sound of safety. Ethan stood a step back, hands empty, and watched the invisible architecture of calm assemble itself right in front of him. There was nothing magical about it, and that was what undid him. It was skill, yes, practiced, yes, but more than that, it was presence. Maya did not try to make Sophia different. She made the room different, and the child did the rest. Maya glanced over her shoulder. We'll keep it simple, she murmured. Dim the lights. A few sips. No new demands. He did as she asked, grateful to be told what to do for once. He dimmed the lamp, fetched the water, and took his place at the edge of the moment like a student in the right class at last. Sophia's breathing lengthened. The hum in the room shifted to a lower, happier key. Maya pressed her cheek to the child's hair and smiled into it, small and private. The way people smile at a sunrise, only they can see. In the hallway, a new email arrived in Ethan's inbox, unnoticed. The subject line was as blank as the last. Don't trust her, it read again, as if repetition could make a truth. The phone on his hip vibrated once and went quiet. Sophia's hand opened and closed against Maya's shoulder, a reflex that softened, and then stopped. Her lashes stilled. The clock across the hall ticked once, twice. Ethan felt the tension that had been clenched in his own neck begin to unspool strand by stubborn strand. He exhaled, and what came out surprised him, a sound that might have been gratitude. But Maya didn't look up, didn't ask for praise. She did what she had come to do. She shifted Sophia to the crib with the gentleness of tidewater, kept one palm on the child's back for 3 slow breaths, then 2 more for good measure. When she straightened, the room seemed to right itself, the way pictures tilt back into plumb after a passing truck. Ethan met her eyes. At the gate to the drive, the intercom crackled. Thomas's voice came thin through the speaker. Delivery at the gate, addressed to Ms. Williams. Maya glanced at Ethan. I haven't ordered anything. I'll meet Thomas, Ethan said. You two go back in. At the front, a small box waited on the pedestal ledge inside the Rottian bar's brown paper. No return address. Her name printed in a careful block hand that tried too hard to look generic. Ethan carried it to the foyer. Thomas brought a letter opener and the kind of look a man develops after witnessing 3 decades of human surprises. Maya returned with Sophia, who drowsed against her shoulder, thumb worrying the rabbit's ear. We can open it later, Maya said, softly decisive. Ethan shook his head. If it's for you, we open it together. He slid the blade under the tape and lifted the lid. Inside lay nothing but tissue and a single photograph. It had been printed on matte paper. The composition was ordinary. A woman at a supermarket checkout, shoulders slightly hunched in the way people hunch when counting coupons or searching for a card at the bottom of a bag. The woman's face wasn't visible, only her back, only the swing of a familiar cardigan, the curve of a familiar neck, the time stamp in the corner from 2 days before. Maya's breath thinned. She didn't step back. She didn't move at all. Thomas said quietly, no note. Ethan slid the photo back into the box with a care that felt like ceremony. He closed the lid and met Maya's eyes. We document it, he said, and we go on. We won't give it more air than it deserves. Maya nodded once. I'll photograph the photograph, log the date. Sophia shifted, whimper soft, then settled again against Maya's collar. The rabbits stitched. I stared solemnly at the foyer chandelier. The rest of the afternoon unfolded on necessary out snack rest, a small stack of blocks. The house adjusted its steps around Maya's rhythm without quite admitting it. Even Marsha's footfall softened outside the nursery at dusk. After dinner oatmeal with pear, 3 slow sips of water, the spoon warm in Maya's hand. Sophia grew heavy-eyed in the glow of the reading lamp. The routine worked like a net. You only noticed when you tried to fall through it and couldn't. Ethan stayed in the doorway, a student of small consistencies. Words to signal rest, Maya murmured, brushing a curl from Sophia's temple. We're safe, we're home. The child exhaled and, as she drifted, made a sound that wasn't quite a word so much as a name dissolved to honey. Yeah. It wasn't louder than the lilt of the humidifier. It didn't need to be. It crossed the space and landed where it meant to land. Maya closed her eyes for a second, not in triumph, but in thanks. She eased Sophia into the crib and kept her palm there for 3 breaths, plus 2. The rabbit found its place near the child's cheek. The nightlight on the dresser made a small moon of the wall. Ethan lingered outside, watching how a body learns a lullaby by touch. Something inside him wanted to say the name back into the room, to soften it into the air the way Sophia had, as if saying it could coat the house in something kinder. He didn't say it later. With the house trimmed back to whispers, the log on the counter tallied the day in quiet victories: 8:15 a.m. oatmeal, to 10 p.m. nap after garden walk, 6:45 p.m. pear slices accepted, 7:30 p.m. settled with lavender hum. Ethan read each line and felt the shape of competence growing like a scaffold he could climb. When Maya stepped out of the nursery, she turned off the lamp and pulled the door nearly closed, leaving it open the ceremonial 2 inches. In the whole light, she looked briefly older, briefly younger, the age of anyone who's chosen to stay. Thank you, Ethan said. You'll do it too, she answered. Routine is a kindness for her, for us. He nodded. The corridor stretched long between them, lined with framed photographs that looked suddenly less like proof and more like prayers. Maya walked down the hall toward the staff wing, tote over her shoulder, steps unhurried. Ethan turned back to the nursery and, almost without thinking, retraced her last 2 steps. He stopped at the door, put his hand on the frame, and listened. From inside, the even breath of a toddler asleep, the soft whisper of a machine pretending to be the smallest rustle of a rabbit's cloth ear against a pillow. He didn't knock. His palm stayed on the wood a moment longer than it should have, feeling the grain, practicing the art of being present on the threshold without barging. Behind him, the refrigerator hummed quietly in the kitchen, keeping the routine warm in its magnet grip. The house exhaled. In the foyer, a small brown box sat tucked into a drawer, logged and dated, waiting for whatever light would eventually find it. In the dark of the nursery, Sophia turned in her sleep and reached for the space where a hand had been. finding the warmth still there. The post went live just after sunrise. Thomas found it before Ethan's coffee cooled, the headlines sitting smugly on a neighborhood blog that made gossip feel like public service. The gilded house and the new caregiver. A drone shot of the Caldwell roofline opened the piece. Below it, a paragraph of suggestive restraint, no names. Just enough breadcrumbs for anyone within 10 zip codes to guess. A young woman seen entering at odd hours. A billionaire widower rumored to be rearranging the household. A child's routine overseen by staff not listed on the original registry. Ethan read it in the kitchen, back to the window, jaw set hard enough to ache. Maya stood by the sink, drying a sippy cup, the way one polishes a slow, careful, as if clarity might be preserved by touch. She didn't ask to see the post. She didn't have to. She could hear it in the pitch of the house. "It'll blow over," Thomas said, which was true of wind and untrue of damage. "Do we respond?" Ethan asked. "Not yet," Thomas replied. "But we take note." The phone rang 10 minutes later. "Margaret Caldwell." "Good morning, Mother," Ethan said. The words a reflex that smoothed itself flat. "I'm sure you've seen it," she said without prelude. In Margaret's world, there were no small talks, only tripwires. Investors don't read neighborhood blogs, but they read people who do. "I have calls from 3 board members asking if the house has changed." "It hasn't," he said. "I'm glad to hear it," Margaret answered, though her tone said she wasn't convinced. "Keep things out of the light for a while. No surprises. We don't need complications." Ethan watched Sophia, in her high chair, press a pear cube into her palm and then offer it solemnly to the rabbit. Maya caught the moment in the corner of her eye and smiled, small and private. "I'm handling it," he said. "Are you? Because if a narrative gets there first, it becomes the truth. Don't give them material." "I won't," he said, deliberately not saying more. He could have said, "Her name is Maya. She's the reason your granddaughter slept through the night." He didn't. The call ended in the neutral way important calls do nothing agreed. Everything implied. They had a pediatric appointment mid-morning, a routine follow-up scheduled weeks ago. Maya packed the tote. Ethan grabbed the folder with Sophia's insurance card, a letter authorizing Maya to make day-to-day care decisions, and a copy of the contract they'd both signed. The clinic in downtown Palo Alto was all soft grays and woodland decals, a place designed to teach children that institutional spaces could be kind. At check-in, the receptionist's smile faltered when Maya approached the counter with Sophia on her hip. "Name Sophia Whitman," Maya said, offering the card and the authorization. "We're here for Dr. Liang." The receptionist scanned the letter, eyes tracking the paragraph that explained who Maya was and what she was legally allowed to do. Something shuttered in her face. "We only allow parents or legal guardians to sign consents," she said, not unkindly. Not kindly bureaucracy's tone. Maya kept her voice calm. "Mr. Caldwell will sign clinical consents. I'm checking in and can provide history. Here's his signature authorizing me to handle routine matters." A mother in yoga clothes glanced up from the waiting area, then down at her phone, then up again in the way people look when they recognize a headline wearing skin. The receptionist slid the paper back across the desk with 2 fingers. "I'll need to hear it from the Guardian. On the phone now." Maya felt the familiar sting nod. The right person, not enough person. Not the person they expected, and kept her shoulders level. "Of course," she said. She turned to Ethan, who had lagged at the door to juggle a conference call he'd refused to take, and held up the paper with a question that was also a plea for efficiency. He walked over, took the paper, and then very deliberately set it back on the counter. The room noticed. "I'm Ethan Caldwell," he said. "Sophia's father, Ms. Williams, is her caregiver. I'm here. She speaks for my child when I'm in the room, and when I'm not. Whatever you need to hear from a guardian, you can hear from me now." The receptionist straightened, surprised not by the name but by the clarity. "We just have to follow policy, sir." "Then let's follow it," he said, his voice soft as far-off thunder. "Put whatever my signature needs to be on in front of me, and note that Ms. Williams's involvement is with my authorization. We won't be relitigating that every visit." It wasn't a raised voice. It landed like one anyway. The receptionist swallowed, picked up her pen, and nodded. "We can do that." They sat. Sophia kicked her shoes gently against the chair, content in the safe geometry of lap and arm. Maya pointed out the fox on the mural. Sophia pointed back, then touched the lotion line on Maya's wrist as if confirming the universe. Across the room, the yoga-clothes mother whispered something to another parent, eyes flicking. The whisper had the texture of the blog post title. Plausible, not quite fair. Maya focused on the toddler in her arms and on the weight that had become a kind of ballast. Let the truth live in actions, she reminded herself, and felt the reminder settle like a stone she could step on. Dr. Liang arrived with a warm smile and clean hands. The checkup lasted 11 minutes, long enough to measure, listen, reassured, and note a slight teething irritation that explained the heat spike and the restless sleep. You did exactly what we would have advised, she told Maya, glancing kindly at Ethan. Both of you, keep up the routine. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. It mattered anyway. Back at the house, Ethan asked the staff to gather in the formal sitting room, a space that often looked like a painting of people rather than a place for them. Today it held people, their faces arranged in varying degrees of curiosity. Marcia stood near the back, arms crossed in a posture that kept her chest from ever being wholly yours. 2 things, Ethan said. First, you've probably seen a blog post. You will not comment on it, inside or outside this house. If anyone asks you about our home, you say you don't discuss the family. A rippler sent relief. A few offended prides at being preempted from telling their version. Second, he continued, eyes softening in a way that made the billionaire vanish and the father emerge. Ms. Williams is Sophia's caregiver. She sets the child's routine. If she sets the hallway near the nursery needs to be quiet after 7, it needs to be quiet. If she tapes a list to the fridge, it remains on the fridge. You report to Thomas. Thomas reports to me. If you have concerns, you bring them to us, not to each other. He didn't look at Marcia, he didn't have to. Instructions travel better when they aren't delivered like arrows. Understood, Thomas asked, and his voice, which usually sounded like a good leather chair feel, carried enough edge to make a chorus of yes, sir, rise and fade. The day eased into evening on rails of routine. Pear slices. A song Maya called Lavender that was really only 3 notes and a promise. The rabbit's ear squeaked once. Sophia laughed once, the sound so bright it rearranged the molecules in the room. Foreshadowing comes disguised as trivial. At dusk, the front gate camera stuttered 1 second of static where there should have been the gentle loop of street and tree. Thomas noticed. He replayed the feed and froze the half-second where a license plate slid through the frame, numerals glinting, then gone. He wrote them down in a neat hand, the way men of his generation record important things, and slid the slip into his breast pocket. Same sedan as Monday, he told Ethan. California plates. Pattern is 3 evenings and 5, near the gate. Never at the door. You think it's the blog? Ethan asked. I think patterns deserve respect, Thomas said. That night, after Sophia surrendered to sleep with one hand crooked around the rabbit and the other open at her side, Ethan and Maya stood in the hall, an extra beat. The air between them held more than it had the day before. Stillness. Yes, and also the quiet debt of people who had walked through a gauntlet together without reaching for the same shield. Thank you for this morning, Maya said. Meaning, the clinic, the tone, the choice to say she speaks for my child. You shouldn't have had to ask, he replied. She shook her head. I didn't, you offered. That's different. He wanted to say he was late to these differences, but he knew when gratitude needed silence to keep its dignity. He nodded. She turned toward the staff wing, and he toward his study. His phone chimed once on the desk, a new email sliding into the quiet, like a stone into a still pond. No subject, no signature. He opened it because he was tired of not opening. The image loaded slowly and then all at once. Maya in the back garden. Earlier that afternoon, holding Sophia on her hip near the camellias, the child's face turned toward the sun as if it were a familiar. The angle suggested distance. The focus was too competent for accident. Beneath the photo, the single line of text, everything you have is leaning on her. Ethan felt the skin along his forearms tighten, not from threat alone but from the way the sentence reached for a truth and twisted it. He stared at the screen, heard the house settling, heard somewhere down the hall the seam of the rabbit's ear squeak as Sophia moved in sleep. He exhaled and stared harder, as if clarity might come from intensity. It didn't. It rarely does. He forwarded the email to Thomas without a note, then sat very still, listening for the sound a man makes when he decides what kind of protector he is going to be. Outside, at the edge of the hill, a sedan idled or didn't, just a shadow to a camera that blinked exactly when it mattered. Inside, the sentence on his phone stared back until even the pixels felt like they were waiting for his answer. The answer arrived in a language without verbs. Mid-morning, light pooled on the nursery rug when Sophia toddled between them, rabbit dangling from one hand. She paused, pressed the toy's soft ear against Ethan's fingers, solemnly, then turned and leaned her whole small weight into Maya's legs. No speech, just a transfer of warmth, a child's barometer reading the pressure in the room, and pointing to clear skies. Ethan felt the tap of plush on his knuckles like a benediction he hadn't known he wanted. He met Maya's eyes over the crown of curls. She didn't crow victory, she just tucked Sophia into the arc of her hip and swayed once, like a tree memorizing the wind. "Teach me what she's telling us," he said, surprising them both with the request. Maya nodded. "Start with how she settles, and what unsettles her." They spent the week watching The Smallest Weather on Monday. Ethan stood in the doorway as Maya narrated the quiet science of nap time. 15 minutes of dim, she whispered, lowering the shades to a half-light that made the mobiles behave like clouds. No new demands. Same two phrases. She touched the warm curl at Sophia's temple and murmured, "We're safe. We're home." The words so soft they seemed to thread themselves into the weave of the blanket. From the hall, Ethan listened to the baby monitor with his eyes closed, learning how a breath deepens when comfort lands, how a restless foot quiets, when a hand stays on a small back for 3 heartbeats more than necessary. He didn't touch the door handle. He learned to be near without being noised. On Tuesday, the house tried to be cooperative. Vendors came and went on quieter souls. Marcia drifted past the nursery with towels pressed to her chest as if muffling her own presence. At lunch, Sophia tested the distance between fear and trust with pear cubes and a spoon. She held a slice up to Ethan, eyes searching Maya's face for permission. Maya smiled and nodded once. "Go, Anand." The child extended her arm a fraction farther. Ethan leaned in, accepted the gift as if it were rare. They both grinned. A circuit completed. "Why ask you with her eyes?" he asked later, curious instead of bruised. "Because I'm the constant when you're busy," Maya said, not as accusation, simply naming weather patterns. "She'll pivot to you as you become the constant, too." He carried the sentence like a folded map. Wednesday. The last of the fever haze lifted and Sophia remembered laughter. She rediscovered the squeak in the rabbit's ear and the joy of making it perform on command. The sound pinged down the corridor and found Ethan in his study, altering the flavor of his email. He hit send on a message to a client without his usual polish and realized he didn't mind. Some things could be repaired later, some couldn't. He knew which kind he was holding that evening. He hovered at the edge of the kitchen while Maya prepped a tiny family dinner. The kind of meal that didn't try to impress anyone. Tomato soup, small triangles of grilled cheese, applesauce that tasted like autumn. He reached for bowls. She handed him the ladle. The choreography was tentative, but promising, a waltz learned from the feet up. "Would you sit with us?" he asked, the invitation quiet enough to retreat if she needed it to. Maya set the spoon down and considered him. Boundaries hung between them like a good fence. Visible, protective, not punitive. "If it's for Sophia," she said at last. "Yes." They ate at the kitchen island instead of the long, lonely table in the dining room. Sophia sat in her high chair, feet kicking a gentle rhythm against the rung. She watched each of them as if deciding who was the moon and who was the tide. When Ethan lifted a spoon of soup, she glanced at Maya, a nod. She opened her mouth when Maya offered a bite of applesauce. Sophia looked to Ethan. He smiled. She accepted. It was ridiculous and holy, the way permission could become comfort when offered without pride. "Baby monitor," Ethan asked later, as they rinsed bowls. "Could we listen together tonight? I want to hear what you hear in the pauses." Maya studied him for a beat, then nodded. "After bath. We keep it simple. No new toys, no new songs, no new heroics," he said, attempting a joke and finding he meant it. She half smiled, enough to say she'd heard him. Thursday brought fog and a mail delivery Ethan almost ignored. Bills, a glossy catalog, a plain envelope with the house address and no return. He slit it open and found a photocopy of the blog post from earlier in the week, a red pen circling the phrase "young woman seen entering at odd hours." No note attached. He logged it and moved on. He didn't show Maya, not to hide, but to curate. Oxygen. By late afternoon, the fog had burned off and the garden was a scatter of light. Maya took Sophia out for a short loop, rabbit captive in the crook of the child's arm. Ethan fell in beside them, adjusting his stride to the cadence of little legs. At the fountain, Sophia stretched both arms up, she said, clear and decisive. Maya lifted the child's head, dropping naturally to the familiar shelf of her shoulder. Ethan's arms ached with a want that surprised him, an ache, born not of lack, but of wanting to be the person a small body trusted without thinking. He didn't reach to take her. He walked beside them and let the ache teach him something about effort. Dinner was uncomplicated again. The house seemed to like it that way. The radio in the staff wing hummed at a volume that was more background, then mood. Thomas passed through like good weather. It was Maya who noticed the doorbell, the tone from the front gate that wasn't really a bell so much as a discreet ping. In the kitchen monitor, the camera feed flickered. 1 second of black, 2, then the image returned, empty curbed, trees swaying like nothing had happened. Glitch? Ethan asked. Maybe, Maya said, but her eyes had gone a shade more alert. The way animals look up before a storm arrives with rain. Thomas was already at the console in the foyer, replaying the loop. He made a note on a small pad and slid it into his pocket the way he'd done with the license plate earlier in the week. I'll pull the logs, he said, and call our vendor. Might be nothing. Might be something. They tucked Sophia in early. Bath, towel, the good lotion with the lavender label. Maya hummed the 3-note melody that had begun to feel like the house's real password. At the crib, she pressed her palm to Sophia's back for 3 breaths, then 2, then 1 extra because the child's fingers curled at the edge of the blanket as if asking the world to stay. Ethan stood at the threshold and practiced being gravity. The baby monitor whispered its quiet rain in his hand. In the hallway, he and Maya listened together, not to words, but to the shape of quiet, a hitch, a sigh, the long exhale that meant the body had finally let go. She does a half-turn right. Before the deeper sleep, Maya murmured an interpreter at the border between wake and rest. When you hear that, don't check. Let the turn become the drift. He nodded and felt, for the first time, that he could carry part of this, without dropping it. They parted in the hall with a good night that meant good practice. Ethan returned to his study to log the day in his own hands. More victories. Names of songs, the exact time Sophia accepted the soup without making the mum sound that meant no. He was mid-sentence when Thomas knocked once and came in. I spoke with the security vendor, Thomas said, coming to the point. There was a deliberate dip on the gate camera. Not a full breach, but a nudge. The same IP range probed the system earlier this week. IT traced it to a relay used by a handful of, let's call them, enthusiasts. One handle keeps recurring. On a forum tied to that relay, Ethan set down his pen, meaning Thomas took a folded printout from the inside pocket of his jacket. The old-school gesture dignifying the new-school threatened, placed it on the desk, meaning this isn't casual, and that whoever is playing near our perimeter may be the same person feeding the blog. Ethan stared at the single line circled in red on the page, a user handle stitched into a breadcrumb trail of code, and comments.vkane. He said it aloud before he knew he'd decided to. Kane. Maya appeared at the study door, drawn by the low murmur the way people are drawn to the edge of a conversation that smells like rain. She had shed her cardigan for a soft t-shirt, the kind of change people make only when they forget to perform. Everything okay? She asked, eyes moving from Thomas to Ethan and back. Thomas turned the printout slightly so she could see, then looked to Ethan for permission he didn't need but always asked. Ethan nodded. Maya stepped closer, read the handle, and went very still. It was the kind of stillness that isn't absence but concentration, the body narrowing to a point to keep the past from flooding the present. Do you know the name? Ethan asked quietly. Maya swallowed once, a visible reset. I do. The house seemed to hold its breath. Even the monitor's faux rain sounded farther away. Thomas spoke gently. We'll take this through proper channels. Logs, vendor reports, the police liaison. No sudden moves, no heroics. But we wanted you to hear the name from us. Maya nodded. Thank you. Another small weather change moved through the room. The front of a storm announcing itself without thunder yet. From the nursery, through to doors and a corridor of framed photographs, came the tiniest rustle of fabric as Sophia turned onto her side, the half-turn before deeper sleep that Maya had described. The sound found them like a north star. Ethan looked from the printout to Maya, then to the baby monitor's calm light. Tomorrow, he said, steady, making a promise to the air and to the people in it. We act. Outside, the gate camera cycled, its picture crisp again. Inside, 3 adults stood in a room and tested the strength of a name, while in the small bed down the hall, a child slept like fair weather after a long week of rain. The house lost its light in a single breath. One blink, and the chandelier went dark. The hallway sconces died. The nursery nightlight turned to a dull stone. Sound thinned to the low mechanical hush that meant modern life slipped away, leaving rain and heartbeat. Ethan Caldwell's eyes adjusted on a corridor that seemed longer without electricity. Somewhere far off, a backup system coughed and did not quite catch. He had just set down the printout with a circled handle when the silence changed shape. Thomas Green didn't waste a second. Stay here, he said, already moving. In the foyer, he pressed 2 buttons on the recessed panel. fingers steady from a lifetime of procedures. No beeping, no flashing, just a green dot shifting to soft blue. Silent alarm is live, he called, voice carrying the calm of a lighthouse. Dispatch will route units. 10 minutes, maybe less. Maya Williams was already pivoting toward the nursery, her tote in hand, before she remembered she'd left it by the chair. No matter. Her body knew the route by heart now. She opened the door and found Sophia Whitman sitting up in the crib, eyes moon-wide, fingers clamped around the rabbit, the dark pressed close around the child's small frame. "Hey, Strawberry," Maya whispered, voice a warm thread. "Lights? Are taking a nap. We're okay." Sophia reached, urgent and plain. Maya lifted her, tucked the toddler into the crook that had become the map of safe. "We're going downstairs." She breathed into curls that smelled faintly of lavender. "A quiet room, a game, ready." "Stay," Sophia said, soft and shaky, pressing her cheek against Maya's jaw as if fastening herself there. "Stay," Maya echoed, the word both promise and plan. She took the stairs carefully, one hand along the rail, the other a circle around the child. The wine cellar waited at the end of a short hall off the kitchen. Thick door, cool air, the kind of old-world quiet that could cradle a storm. Behind them, the rain found its rhythm on the slate roof. Somewhere in the middle distance, a generator tried again, stuttered, and spun to a low hum that powered nothing in particular. Thomas's panel glowed its soft blue, a reminder that help was on the way even if the lights were not. Ethan moved through the dark with the economical stride of a man who had memorized a floor plan. He skirted a console table he could navigate in sleep, turned toward the kitchen where the cellar door gleamed faintly with stainless hardware. "Maya," he called low. "In here," came the answer steady, the calm of someone who knew how to be borrowed. He exhaled. And then, from the far side of the house, another sound light, wrong, like a glove against glass. He turned toward it. The side hallway that led to the mudroom held the kind of darkness that eats shape. He saw movement before he could name it, a suggestion of a figure, shoulder to doorframe, the quick cut of decision. Ethan's body did what bodies do when intention meets uncertainty. He stepped forward, put himself between whoever that was and the rooms that held the people that were his. "Hey," he said, not a shout, more a drop of sound meant to change a current. The figure paused, a heartbeat, then another. The rain filled the space where other noise might have been. The backup hum ticked up half a notch like a throat clearing. The silhouette moved again close. Enough now for Ethan to register height. The tilt of a head, the impression of a dark jacket that drank what little light there was. A hand lifted as if to reassure or distract. A shoulder brushed the wall. The instant spooled tight. Ethan reached for the nearest thing with wet, a coterie base near the mudroom, and shifted his stance. The figure turned, angled, slipped. Not a fight more, the friction of two intentions colliding and recoiling. Shoes whispered against hardwood. Air moved. A side door that ought to have been deadbolted. "Wasn't Thomas," Ethan called, already moving. "Side entrance, on it." Thomas's steps arrived out of the dark with a speed that seemed younger than his years. He reached the hallway, clicked a small baton from his pocket, more for courage than impact, and shouldered the door as it swung the wrong way. Rain gusted in, cool and sharp. The figure was already a shadow across the patio, the kind of absence that knew where cameras blinked. Thomas didn't follow into the wet. Protocol said you cared for the inside first. He shut the door, turned the lock, threw the deadbolt a second time for the comfort of the click. "Units are en route," he said, more to the air than to anyone, though Ethan stood close enough to nod. In the wine cellar, Maya sank onto the bottom step with Sophia anchored in her lap, the child's breath quick at her throat. The room smelled of oak and stone and the soft sweetness of cork. She made a pocket of warmth with her cardigan and hummed the three-note melody that had become the household's private password. "We're safe." She breathed between notes. "We're home." Sophia's hand climbed to Maya's chin and rested there, palm open, a small compass relearning north. "Stay," she said again. "Only once." "Always," Maya answered. Upstairs, the backup system finally found itself. A strip of emergency lights came alive along the baseboard's thin lines of faint gold that made the house look like it was drawing its own floor plan with a pencil. The refrigerator clicked and then sighed. Somewhere a thermostat rediscovered a number. Red wash flickered, then blue. Tires slowed on wet pavement. In the foyer, Thomas opened the door to two officers already taking notes from the alarm dispatcher's feed. The conversation at the threshold was crisp and contained. Names, times, directions, no drama, only the narrative of what had happened and what would be done next. Attempted intrusion. the taller officer said as he wrote. No property damage, no contact reported. We'll sweep perimeter and check the doors. You'll get a call number and a copy of the report. Your system flagged a tamper at the gate camera earlier this week. Yes, Thomas said, offering the printed log, the kind of paper trail that makes people believe you. We've also noted a vehicle lingering at the base of the hill on 3 evenings. We'll add extra patrol drive-bys for the next 2 weeks, the officer replied. If you see the vehicle again, don't approach, call it in. Ethan guided them to the mudroom and the side door. The officer shone a flashlight at the lock plate, then at the damp footprint just inside. Partial arc that smudged when light touched it. Someone knew just enough to be inconvenient, he said. No crowbar marks. No brute forcey. More like testing. Testing what? Ethan asked. Your response time, the officer said, and the answer felt too simple to be comforting. Good news is, the silent alarm works. The rest we'll handle. They moved as a small caravan back toward the foyer. Rain drummed with a happier confidence, now that it had an audience. When the officers left, the house exhaled. The emergency lights dimmed to barely. The generator's hum settled into background. Thomas closed the door and slid the deadbolt. Then, because good habits are the truest, prayer checked every other lock in a quiet loop. On the kitchen island, where darkness had made a stage earlier, lay a small square of white. It hadn't been there an hour ago. It had the look of something tucked and later found, a note the size of a palm. Folded once, Ethan felt the hair rise along his forearms without drama. Only a recognition of pattern. He unfolded it, for words, in a tidy hand that tried for elegance and landed on theatrical. Victor sends his regards. The room seemed to tip half a degree. Rain went louder and then hushed, as if embarrassed by the coincidence of timing. Maya stepped in from the cellar hallway with Sophia now asleep against her shoulder, limp with the relief that follows fear. She caught the change in Ethan's face before she noticed the paper in his hand. What is it? She asked, not moving closer, saving the child's sleep as if it were a candle in a draught. Ethan turned the note so she could see. He watched her read the 4 words, watched her pupils flare and then narrow in the low light, watched color move very slightly from her face and then return like tide refusing to retreat. Thomas didn't ask who Victor was. Names are sometimes less useful than what you do with them. He took a photo of the note with a work phone, laid the paper flat in a clean sandwich bag from the drawer, and sealed it with a slide of 2 fingers. We'll add it to the report, he said. Chain of custody starts now. Maya didn't look away from the tidy letters. Her jaw relaxed, then set again, not in anger, but in a kind of practiced alignment. She shifted Sophia higher against her chest, as if redistributing strength to the places it would be needed. Okay, she said quietly. The word, not resignation, but readiness. Ethan felt the pull of 2 hungers at once. To tear the paper, to fix the lock, to call, to drive, to do something grand. He did none of those. He put his hand on the island to steady the moment and found, with a small jolt, that it steadied. The officers called back with a report number. Thomas wrote it on. The whiteboard in the pantry were routine and reality shared space now. The generator sighed and, with ceremony, handed power back to the grid. Overhead, the kitchen pendants blinked to life one by one, as if remembering their lines. Maya glanced toward the hall that led to the nursery. I'll put her down, she whispered. Ethan nodded. He watched them go, a small procession of what mattered, then looked back at the plastic sleeve on the island. The 4 words waiting there like a test he had already decided to pass. Rain softened. The house listened to itself again, the way houses do after alarms, counting doors and breaths. In the nursery, a rabbit's ear gave its tiny, ridiculous squeak and then was still. On the island, the note held its shape, name gleaming neatly. Under the kitchen lights, Maya returned to the doorway and met Ethan's eyes. The name on the paper had changed her face only by millimeters, but millimeters can move weather. Tomorrow, Ethan said again, more vow than plan. Maya nodded once, a compass agreeing with north. The generator clicked off. The lights steadied. Outside, beyond the gate, the street was a mirror of rain where any car could be any car. Inside, 4 words sat between 3 people who now knew exactly what they meant. At first light. The porch rail was cold under Maya's palms. She stood there with the plastic sleeve in one hand, the neat square of paper that read Victor sends his regards, and the supermarket photograph in the other. The oaks along the drive were ink cutouts against a rinsed sky. Inside, the house breathed its cautious morning, a kettle beginning to think about boiling, a floorboard answering the day. Maya looked at the 2 artifacts of a life she thought she'd outpaced and felt a surprising calm. Fear wanted her to fold, to make herself small, to disappear in the old ways. Something steadier insisted on another practice. She turned, found the study door open, and said, simply, "Ethan, to tell you everything I can." He set down his mug. Thomas, already at the console, turned his chair with the patient alertness of a man who understands that truth, once invited, deserves a seat. Maya placed the sleeve and the photo on the desk, side by side, the long shadow of the window mullion crossing both like a sundial marking time. "Years ago," she began, voice steady, "I signed a paper I should never have signed. It was called help, but it wasn't. A family emergency had pulled the floor from under us. I was in school working nights, trying to keep the lights on, and care going. The agreement felt like a door. It was a trap." She didn't say the numbers. She didn't need to. The shape of predatory terms can be recognized without recitation. At first it was friendly calls, then less friendly. A car waiting down the block. A man leaning on a counter and making sure I understood how small my life could get. He never touched me. He didn't have to. Fear does most of that work for free. She tapped the corner of the photo. Not hard, just enough to keep the present from drifting. Victor's name was behind more than one of those reminders. When I testified to help someone else pull free, he learned mine. Ethan didn't speak. He let the room hold it. I left. Maya went on. I changed coasts. I took jobs that kept me close to children because being useful is how I remember who I am. I kept my head down, and for a long time, the quiet held. She exhaled. Until the texts started again, and the car. Ethan's jaw tightened, the muscles sketching a line of promise along his cheek. "I won't ask why you didn't tell me on day one," he said softly. "I know the answer. You were protecting the child in the room and the child you used to be." Maya met his eyes with a small, grateful surprise. "I also didn't want to bring trouble to your door." He looked past her to the hallway where a nightlight still glowed, a small moon refusing to set. "Trouble doesn't wait for invitations, but it does respond to plans." Thomas slid a yellow legal pad closer, fountain pen at the ready. "So, evidence and steps," he said in that practical tone that turns panic into checklists. "We already have the alarm report. We add the note and the photograph to the file. We export all gate camera logs from the last 2 weeks and save a copy offline. We photograph everything twice and email it to a secure account with Maya nodded. "I'll forward the earlier messages I kept. I didn't answer them. I shouldn't have hidden them either." "Hidden is just another word for didn't have a safe place to put it yet," Thomas said. "We're making one." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I'm calling counsel. We'll have our attorneys send a preservation letter to the blog. They hold any material referencing our family and ask for their fact-checking process. We'll assert a right to respond." He looked to Maya. "Only if you want to. If not, I'll respond as the parent." "I want to," she said, then added, because she could feel wisdom tugging at her sleeve. "But we answer with facts. Sophia's care. The routine, nothing about Victor that goes to the police." "Agreed," Ethan said. By 9 the plan had the dignity of momentum. Thomas met the patrol car out front and handed over the sealed sleeve and a copy of the gate logs. He sorted the camera feeds with IT and added a cellular backup recorder that would keep a parallel archive even if the main network blinked. He placed a small, almost invisible chime at the nursery end of the corridor, not to alarm, but to let the hallway sing if a door opened that should have stayed closed. Maya made her own list. She photographed the photograph on a clean background, with a ruler in the frame. She took a picture of the text with the header intact and emailed it to a new address the detective provided. She logged the steps in a notebook on the counter with the same neat hand she used for Sophia's meals and naps. 8:45 a.m. evidence preserved. 8:52 call with Officer Bale. Case file updated. She didn't feel less afraid. She felt less alone with it. After lunch, a half bowl of oatmeal and 2 spoonfuls of applesauce. Accepted with the solemnity of a treaty, Sophia fell asleep on Maya's shoulder. The kind of sleep children do when the body trusts the room. Maya settled in the rocker and watched the rise and fall that had taught her more about patience than any book. Somewhere between breath 3 and breath 30, a thought knocked. You could leave. She heard it like a friend who had once saved her and now was offering old help to a new problem. She imagined packing the tote, writing a note, slipping out during nap. The house would survive. Ethan would find another caregiver. Sophia would adjust. The storm would pass over this roof and go looking for hers alone. She pictured the front door. She pictured the driveway. She pictured the moment after the gate closed. What she felt then wasn't relief. It was a hollow. Maya, startled at her own reaction, and then smiled a little, sad and proud. "There you are," she thought. The person who doesn't leave herself anymore. She kissed the soft hair at Sophia's temple and whispered not to the child. Not entirely, I forgive you, and the words surprised her by landing on the younger self who'd signed the paper, the one who had done the best she could with too little. You did what you knew, she added. I know more now. When the nap held, she slipped to the porch for air. The morning had given way to a rinsed blue. Thomas found her there, as if porchers called old souls by name. You're thinking of going, he said, not as accusation, only as observation. I was, she admitted. For about 3 breaths, I imagined the note I'd leave and how quiet this place would be without me. Then I imagined Sophia's eyes when the routine broke. My leaving wouldn't be bravery. It would be panic in a costume. Thomas leaned against the rail, hands folded the way men fold them at graves and weddings. My late wife used to say storms teach roofs what they're made of, he said. When she was ill, I wanted to tear the house down and rebuild it every week. She told me to bring in a chair instead and sit. Staying, she said, is a form of repair. He looked at Maya, his gaze kind. Running isn't healing. There's a difference. Maya swallowed. I know, I don't want to be the reason the wind looks this way. The wind has its own reasons, Thomas said. We have ours. Ethan stepped out then, carrying 2 glasses of water like a man delivering small offerings to a table that mattered. He handed one to Maya and studied her face with the attentiveness of someone learning a new language. If the plan becomes too much, we slow it. If you need space, you take it. But please don't decide for me what risks I can carry. I've been deciding for people for a long time, she said. An apology you could almost miss tucked into the sentence. It's hard to stop, he nodded. It takes practice. They didn't speak for a while. The silence had work to do. When the baby monitors pulsed, Sophia, adjusting with a small Maya, stood. Back to the practice, she said, and the 3 words sounded like a vow a person makes to the ordinary day. By late afternoon, Council had sent the preservation letter and requested the blog standards. The editor replied with the politeness of people who keep their knives in drawers. We're preparing a longer feature on caregiving and public figures. We welcome any anthrorecord context regarding your household. Please respond by tomorrow. At noon. Maya read it at the kitchen counter with a calm that owed more to fatigue than fear. She poured rice into a pot and listened for the small stones the old women in her family taught her to find and remove. She found none. She rinsed anyway. Care is made of redundancies. Ethan drafted a statement that said only what needed saying. Our priority is our daughter's well-being. We're grateful for the professionals who support her. We ask for respect for her routine and privacy. He left space at the bottom for Maya's choice to add a sentence or not. She picked up the pen and wrote, My work is quiet by design. Please let it remain so, for the sake of the child in my care. It wasn't an argument. It was a definition. Dusk softened the edges of the house. The camera at the gate held steady. The chime at the end of the hall never sang. After dinner, when Sophia made the rabbit squeak and then laughed so hard she fell into her own joke, Ethan felt the day click once into place like a gear finding its neighbor. They were washing the last of the bowls when Thomas's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced down, then up, his expression changing the room by a degree. Counsel, he said, reading heads up, not panic it. He turned the screen so they could see the text. Editor confirms. Long-form piece scheduled. Working title. The Mysterious Caregiver. Source described as close to the family. Publish window. Tomorrow morning. The rice pot clicked behind them. Steam retreating. Outside, the Oaks stood with their good shoulders to the street. Inside, 3 people looked at a handful of words and felt the old wind test a new roof. Maya set the dish towel down very carefully, as if weight distribution could change outcomes. She breathed in, she breathed out. She looked at Ethan and Thomas and then at the baby monitor, where the soft sound of a child turning toward deeper sleep made a compass out of the moment. Okay, she said, voice unshaken. We finish the plan. Then we tell the truth. We can, and we keep her routine. Ethan reached for the statement on the counter and slid it closer to her. Together, he said. Thomas tapped the chime once. With his fingertip, a quiet rehearsal for a door that he hoped would never open. Together, he echoed. The house held its breath for a heartbeat and then let it go, as if deciding, too. The red light on the camera winked on, and Ethan Caldwell didn't bother to clear his throat. My priority, he said, steady as a level, is the safety and happiness of my daughter. No studio, no stage, just the sunlit living room. The garden breathing through the windows, a single camera on a small tripod, and Thomas behind it like a kindly sentinel. Maya stood out of frame with Sophia on her hip. the toddler's cheek resting where it always found home. The house had decided to stop whispering. Ethan kept his eyes on the lens, as if speaking directly to the one person who needed convincing. Because a neighborhood blog has raised questions, I'm offering clarity. This is not a story. It's our routine. He lifted a page from the coffee table, the same careful hand that had signed letters to shareholders, now holding a different kind of ledger. Sophia's days are simple by design. Temperature steady at 70 to 71. Dim lights before nap. Small meals, soft pears, oatmeal, water offered frequently. The phrases we use for rest. We're safe, we're home. We are grateful for the caregiver who helps us keep this rhythm. He didn't name Maya because he didn't have to. He didn't perform gratitude. He recorded it. Ms. Maya Williams is authorized to make day-to-day comfort decisions for my child. Medical choices follow our pediatric guidance. I sign clinical consents. We don't speak about family matters outside this home. We ask others to extend the same respect to a 2-year-old who did not ask for attention. He set the page down. No flourish, no moral. Thank you to the professionals who support us, that's all. Thomas lowered a handcut. The room exhaled. Maya brushed Sophia's hair back and kissed the soft place above her temple. Ethan looked over and something unannounced but understood passed between the three of them. This was the kind of daylight you choose. They posted the clip on the family site and sent a written statement to the editor who'd requested context. The written version said only what the video said, line for line, and ended with the sentence Maya had added the night before in a steady, unshowy script. My work is quiet by design. Please let it remain so. For the sake of the child in my care. Thomas hit send and then did what good stewards do. He made tea and set 2 cups down without being asked. The responses arrived fast and human. By noon, the school office forwarded an email from the parent group. Thank you for modeling calm. We see you showing up for your child. If you need anything, carpool coverage, errands, meals, consider us on a rotation. Someone pinned a card to the classroom bulletin board, a watercolor of a little red fox beneath a whisper of trees. Signed in bright marker by 4 parents. We're with you. Let routine win. An hour later, Dr. Liang wrote, formal and warm at once, to whom it may concern. Mr. Caldwell and Ms. Williams have consistently followed standard pediatric comfort measures for a toddler with a low fever, hydration, watchful rest, no aggressive changes to routine. Their questions have been thoughtful and child-centered. This is the kind of caregiving we hope to see. She gave permission to share the note publicly. They did, quietly. Beneath the video, the inbox filled with small, decent things, noisy offers they ignored and quiet ones they accepted. A neighbor wrote, if you ever want someone to stand by the gate at nap time, I can bring a book and a chair. A grandmother across town sent a recipe for applesauce so simple it read like a lullaby. An old colleague of Maria's wrote a line that landed like a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Thank you for speaking plain. Maria believed in routines more than speeches too. Not everyone was softened. A set of comments under the blog's original post tried to make suspicion intelligent. Odd hours, unusual closeness, power dynamics. Ethan didn't click see more. He chose, instead, to watch the baby monitor's small green dot declare that someone smaller and more honest was asleep. Through it all, the house practiced. Maya kept the log with the care of someone who understands that data can be a mercy. 12:05 pear slices accepted. 1:22 2:05 nap, half turn before deeper sleep. 3 o'clock water sips, 3 HMS of approval. Ethan learned to narrate quietly. Dim now, he'd say, tilting the shade. We're safe. He said it for Sophia, and, increasingly, he said it for himself. Late afternoon brought the editor's reply to their statement, polite, professional, and essentially unmoved. Thank you for the context. Our feature will publish tomorrow morning. We've confirmed multiple details with a source close to the family. The sentence sat there, clean and cold. Source close to the family. Maya read it, no flinch, only the slow lift and fall of a person bracing and refusing to bend. It doesn't change what we do next, she said softly, and returned to the sink to rinse a bowl until it gleamed, as if light were something you could apply. Ethan walked out to the terrace and let the air do a small audit of his choices. The statement was out, the doctor's note was public. The routine was intact. He could feel daylight doing its work, disinfectant for rumor, tonic for fear. And still, some shadows preferred daylight. They only learned to hide better. Back inside, the phone on the counter buzzed in a friendlier register. The parents group had posted the video in their chat with a string of green hearts and practical offers. We can rotate pickups if cameras are being weird near your gate. We can send snacks and labeled bags so no one has to sign for anything. It was the kind of help that respected structure. Maya wrote back, "Thank you for keeping our quiet," and left it there. At 3. Sophia woke with a small gasp that was not distress, only a child remembering a sound from a dream. Maya was already there with her palm and her 3-note hum. Ethan watched from the hallway and thought not for the first time that a lullaby is a thesis you defend daily. By evening, the city had its gentlest glow. The house had the look homes get when they've decided to be homes, a little scuffed, a little proud. Ethan reheated soup and sliced apples and did not pretend their food would be photographed. After dinner, Sophia discovered she could make a new sound with her rabbit's foot, something between a whisper and a squeak, and laughed herself. Hiccup. Maya laughed too, the sort of laugh that doesn't perform, and Ethan felt the day notch again into place. Then the feature went live. It wasn't a smackdown, it was worse, careful insinuation dressed as concern. The mysterious caregiver who holds the routine at the Caldwell estate. No surnames, but too many details to be accident. The cadence of Maya's walks, a line about a list taped to a refrigerator, a description of the child's rabbit that read like a photograph. The piece praised commitment while asking whether boundaries blur inside gilded walls. It quoted a source close to the family, describing a household dynamic in flux. The line didn't scorch, it chilled. Ethan felt the temperature drop between his shoulder blades and knew, in the particular way you know where a draft comes from, that close to the family wasn't code for stuff. He didn't want to think it. The words gave him no choice. He closed the laptop carefully, like a book you don't agree with but refuse to slam. In the living room, Maya was building a small tower of blocks for Sophia to topple with scientific glee. The child's face was intent, then triumphant, then intent again. The practice of joy. Ethan sat on the rug and let a blue block rest in his palm. "Thank you for today," he said, meaning the camera, the statement, the steadiness. Maya placed a green block on his blue. "Thank you for the same." When the tower fell and Sophia clapped her hands and shouted a sound that wasn't a word, but was the exact shape of delight, they all laughed. Daylight, after all, is not an argument. It is a condition. Night edged in. Thomas made his last round. Logs, light sand, paused by the gate console. Stable, no stutter in the feed. He wrote the time on a small card and slid it into the drawer where practical men keep their peace. Upstairs, Ethan stood outside the guest room where Maya would tuck Sophia's rabbit beside a neat stack of folded pajamas and thought of Maria's journal, a line he'd memorized and never understood until now. Calm isn't a talent, it's a practice you do for someone you love. Daylight had a practice too. It required repetition. He took the stairs more quickly than he meant to and stopped at the threshold of the library his mother favored when she visited. The place where reputation had been polished for years. Margaret Caldwell sat in the wingback, by the window, pearls off, reading glasses on, the long day caught gently in the set of her shoulders. She looked up, and in the lamplight her face was both the woman who raised him and the woman power had trained her to be. "Ethan," she said, almost tender, "I saw your video, you were measured." "I meant to be," he said. He didn't sit. He held the question like a glass of water he refused to spill and walked toward the middle of the room where neither of them could claim the door or the window as allies. "The feature ran," he said. "It cites a source close to the family." Margaret inhaled. It was a small sound. It made the quiet ring. Ethan met his mother's eyes, the same blue his daughter carried, a color that could be ocean or ice. He didn't raise his voice. He chose daylight even here. "Mother," he asked, plain as a ledger line, "are you the source?" For once, Margaret Caldwell didn't answer a question with a strategy. She answered by not answering at all. Ethan's single quotes, words "Mother, are you the source?" hung in the library like dust in lamplight. Margaret closed the book on her lap that wasn't a book at all, only a folder of articles she'd been pretending to read, and looked at her son with a face that belonged to both the boardroom and the nursery of another life. "No," she said at last, careful and true. "I did not speak to the reporter. A breath. But I did meet someone who wanted me to." The room shifted by a degree. "A woman asked for tea last week, said she consults for families who live visibly." She mentioned the blog, hinted at a longer feature. She suggested that sometimes, in order to protect a legacy, one must offer context before others invent it. Margaret's mouth shaped a smile that wasn't one. "I told her this house needed order. I told her routine matters. I told her nothing that wasn't obvious. Then I asked her to leave." "And after?" Ethan asked. "I convinced myself. I'd closed the door." Her gaze flicked to the window where the last of the day clung to the glass. "It seems I left it ajar." Silence did its small arithmetic. Down the hall, a soft thud, the sound of blocks finding the floor, and a toddler's understated triumph. In some other century, this would have been enough to absolve a household of anything that wasn't bread and sleep. Ethan nodded. Once. Thank you for telling me. Margaret lifted a hand as if to ward off a verdict and then let it fall. Do not mistake my caution for malice, she said, and the sentence came out thinner than she'd meant. I have made an idol of reputation because reputation once tried to make a ruin of me. She stood, the past lengthening her spine, and crossed to the low shelf that held the journals Maria had left behind. Her fingers hovered over spines she had not touched since the funeral. When I was 24, she said, I raised money to pay tuition for 3 girls from a neighborhood no one donated to. I made coffee, baked cakes, knocked on doors. A paper ran a story with my picture beside a headline that suggested I was trading charity for influence. I learned, overnight, how fast kindness can be mis- I learned to control the caption under my face. Her laugh was a small, tired thing. I have been captioning my life ever since. She pulled one journal free. Leather soft with handling, a ribbon pressed flat between entries. She carried it to the wingback chair and sat again. The book opens on her knees. I have not been able to read these, she admitted, eyes on the page instead of on her son. Every sentence felt like stealing. Take one, Ethan said gently. Maria would rather you read than guess. Margaret turned a page, then another. Her breath changed at a paragraph written in her daughter-in-law's quick, unafraid script. If I am not here, please don't let the house go quiet. Quiet is not the same as peace. Quiet is erasure. Fill it with small, good noise. Let routine be music. Let our child hear actual life. Margaret blinked, and the ink swam. She pressed her fingertip to the bottom of the page as if steadying a boat. I used to fear noise, she said, voice small and private. I thought noise meant loss of control. Maria thought silence meant loss of soul. In the doorway, Maya paused, there and not, a courtesy the house had taught her. She had come to ask where the extra sheets were kept and found instead a woman reading a sentence that might save them all some time. She would have slipped away if Margaret hadn't looked up and met her gaze. You taped a list to the refrigerator, Margaret said, a statement that had been a grievance 2 days ago and now presented itself as a fact with room to breathe. Yes, Maya answered. So, anyone who loves this child can read the same song. Margaret closed the journal. I have been singing a different one for too long. Ethan watched the smallest tilt in his mother's posture, the kind you learn to spot in people who don't admit they're changing until after they have. He saw the argument she'd brought into the room lose its footing, and the story she'd tried to contain step forward to be countered. Come with me, he said, not a command, an invitation. Duck crossed the hall to the nursery. No one spoke. In the soft light, Sophia lay with one hand on the rabbit, the other flung open in the generous way children sleep, when they are sure someone will guard the borders of their dreams. The room smelled faintly of lavender and clean cotton and something, warmth, a trace, perhaps, of music that had once been aired. Maya stood near the crib, silent sentinel. Margaret stepped closer than she had allowed herself to before and felt, almost physically, the difference between quiet as fear and quiet as protection. She glanced at the baby monitor's serene green light and at the small log on the dresser, where times and tiny victories lived. The detail moved her in a way grand gestures rarely had. I am not your enemy, she said into the hush, uncertain whether she was speaking to Maya or to Maria or to her own younger self. I have been unhelpful, I can stop. Maya nodded, accepting the only apology that had ever felt right in houses like this, one that arrived as a change in behavior. Later, when the house had shrunk to its smallest circle and the garden had gone slate dark, Margaret returned to the library to sit with the journal a little longer. It was deep shelf reading, slow, not skimmed. The kind you do when you are trying to let a dead woman teach you to be kinder to the living. Lines leaped out. Routine is a vote for tomorrow. Noise can be proof of love. The words landed with a particular weight because they were not theory here. They were the texture of a 2-year-old's day. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Unknown number. The message preview showed a single line. She opened it. If you can't keep the caregiver in her lane, others will. We'll publish her address at dawn. Think of the child. The sentence carried that particular poison disguised as concern, structured like a favor. Margaret's blood went cold, then hot. She stared at the text again, at the false piety of think of the child, and understood in a flash how manipulation arranges itself to resemble prudence. A second message arrived before the first finished burning in her mind. Final chance. Do the right thing. She didn't need a signature. She felt the same foul temperature as the blog's tone, the same cowardly angle as the note left in the kitchen the night before. She pictured a man with a neat hand and a taste for pressure. She pictured the gate camera that had blinked at the wrong moment and the sedan that had lingered just long enough. Her old instinct tightened and seal managed took 2 steps forward. Then Maria's sentence took 3. Please don't let the house go quiet. Margaret stood, phone in hand, and walked with a speed that surprised her to the study where Thomas was reviewing the gate logs and Ethan was drafting lines for a response he might never send. She put the device on the desk between them. This came to me, she said, no preface, no excuse. I am not forwarding it quietly. I am not asking what you think I should do. I am telling you I will do it with you. Thomas read the message, his mouth shaping the same thin line it had worn when he bagged the note for the police. He took a photograph of the screen, emailed it to the detective with a subject line that was only the case number, and then placed Margaret's phone face down as if pressing a wound. Ethan looked at his mother the way one looks at a person who has chosen not to flinch. Thank you, he said. He meant for the text, and for the shift, and for the admission. That control could be repurposed as care. Margaret exhaled a breath she had been holding for decades. I will speak to anyone who needs speaking to, she said, reclaiming a language that had once only served optics. Board, donors, neighbors, and if that woman calls again, I will give her my answer in clear daylight. Which is, Ethan asked, a test he already knew she would pass. That the only legacy worth protecting is a child's sense of safety, Margaret said, and that I have been guarding the wrong door. No one applauded. It wasn't that kind of scene. Somewhere down the corridor the rabbit gave its ridiculous squeak and was forgiven for it, by everyone who heard. They made small plans because small plans are the ones that hold. Thomas would add Margaret's number to the police file and forward the messages with times. The attorney would include the threats in their preservation letter and ask the paper to withhold any identifying details about the caregiver. Ethan would prepare to answer the board's questions without apologizing for the existence of music. In his house, Maya would keep the log, dim the lights, pour water into a cup small enough for a toddler's hands. By Monday morning, the sun had returned with a shy brightness, and the house behaved like a patient who had turned a corner. The school parents had left a paper bag on the stoop, stickered pears, a note that read routine deserves cheerleaders. Dr. Liang had sent a second letter shorter than the first. This child is well cared for. Please let her be. Margaret stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Maya lift Sophia into the high chair. The child's feet swinging to a rhythm, the room understood now. Ethan set down a saucer of applesauce and a tiny spoon. No one performed. They practiced. Maya glanced up, met Margaret's eyes, and held them for a heartbeat longer than most staff would ever dare. Something like truce. No, not truce. The space, without a word. Margaret lifted her phone. It was not a prop anymore, it was a tool. She typed a message to the detective. If the sender of last night's threats is identified, I am willing to make a statement. She did not add for my granddaughter or for the caregiver or for my daughter-in-law whose journal taught me how to change. The statement would know who it was for. When Ethan brushed past her a moment later, she caught his sleeve lightly. He turned. You are not alone, she said. It was not a benediction or a slogan. It was an accounting entry finally balanced. He nodded, and in the nod lived what came next: boardrooms and cameras and a different kind of daylight. Outside, the oaks held the street the way good trees do. Inside, a mother and her son stood in the threshold of a house that had learned, over a handful of hard days, how to prefer music to silence. Maya stepped into the circle of light with empty hands. No lectern, no stack of notes, just the wide room of a neighborhood center, folding chairs in a loose crescent, and faces that looked like stories waiting to be told back to themselves. Ethan sat in the front row with Sophia in his lap, the child's head tucked beneath his chin, the rabbit's ear peeking out like a witness. Maya's voice found the room before the microphone did. Courage, she said, steady, doesn't always look like leaving the burning building. She let the sentence breathe. Sometimes it looks like staying to fix the wiring. A soft ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. She went on, unhurried. For a long time, I believed quiet meant safety. I changed apartments, changed cities, kept my head down. Then a small person taught me that quiet is not the same as peace. Peace, she smiled toward the lavender headband above the rabbit's ear. Sounds like a steady bedtime song and the same cup of water every night. Laughter gentle, grateful broke and settled. She continued, I won't tell you I'm fearless, I will tell you I'm practicing. Practicing documenting what's wrong. Practicing asking for help, practicing staying when staying is the braver thing. She didn't mention threats, or letters, or names. She didn't need to. She described a routine, the borderless hero of her days, and the room. Understood that she was arguing for a kind of courage you could teach a child to trust. Sometimes, she finished, the strongest thing we can do is not to run but to remain and to let other people remain with us. Silence stood up first, then the room. The ovation wasn't loud so much as long, as if they were holding the note for someone else who couldn't yet. Ethan rose with them, one hand steadying, Sophia the other pressed briefly to his heart. When the clapping thinned, he mouthed proud and saw Maya's eyes shine in a way that didn't require tears, while the community chose its word braver. Different room chose its numbers, 31 floors above a double row of ficus trees, and a river of traffic. The Caldwell boardroom gleamed with a kind of restraint that begged to be interrupted. Margaret sat 2 seats down from the head of the table, pearls off, reading glasses on, her posture more ally than emblem. Across from her, a director cleared his throat with the punctuation of habit. Ethan, he began, optics aside, shareholders are entitled to stability. The household visibility, this caregiver piece has introduced noise. Are you still positioned to lead day-to-day operations with the required attention? Ethan didn't flinch. I'm positioned to lead with the required clarity, he said, which means naming that the center of gravity in my life is my daughter. For the next season, I'm delegating daily operations to our crew. We lose a degree of continuity. We gain integrity. A rustle, surprise, relief, disapproval ran the table like wind under a door. You're aware, another director said carefully, there's a significant contract that expects your personal oversight. I'm aware, he said. No drama, just arithmetic, and I'm prepared to lose it. Margaret watched her son's face resolve into a map she finally recognized, not of acquisition, but of alignment. She leaned into the microphone built into the table. The company will honor commitments, she said, and we will honor the truth that a brand without a human center is set dressing. Our coup is ready. Our values, if tested, will do more than survive. They will lead. No vote was taken. It didn't need one. The decision moved around the table and found its level. A deal slid, predictably, into someone else's folder. Ethan didn't chase it down the hall. Back in the house with fewer speeches and more practice, Thomas and Officer Bale sat shoulder to shoulder at the kitchen island, their laptops open in the comfortable mess of a clean investigation. The gate logs stretched across the screen like quiet music. A second monitor held the forum handle that had slipped, cocky, through a dozen comment threads. We've got our relay IP, Bale said, tapping, and a nice daisy chain of accounts the owner thought was clever. They weren't subpoenas. Already out. Your vendor's offsite recorder was the difference. He nodded toward Thomas. Good call. Thomas answered with a modest nod of a man who believes in backups, the way other men believe in angels. The email arrived while they were still, in short, anonymous, brittle with that particular counterfeit concern. You can paint the story, but I know the walls. Think of the child. Maya opened it, took a screenshot, captured headers like she'd been taught, and forwarded the whole thing to Officer Bale without a single keystroke in reply. Don't engage, he confirmed. Don't feed, she said. 2 hours later, a second device on Bale's wrist buzzed. He glanced down, then up, satisfaction threading his voice. Warrant granted. We'll pay a visit. No sirens. No spectacle. Just a knock in another zip code and a quiet set of handcuffs in a lobby that had seen too many worse reasons to be named. Charges would be paperwork for now. Harassment. Unlawful access, but paperwork, done right, is architecture. A temporary protective order would hold like scaffolding until something sturdier took its place. Bale texted Thomas, in custody. No incident. You'll get formal notice. Then he sent a second text, unusual in its warmth. Tell her, good documentation. Wins. Thomas did. Maya let out a breath. She hadn't realized she was rationing. She didn't celebrate. She set a glass of water on the counter and wrote the time in the log. By afternoon, the house felt more like a house and less like a contested idea. Ethan returned from the boardroom, not lighter exactly, but more legible to himself. He found Maya in the nursery, fitting clean sheets onto the crib mattress with the efficient tenderness of someone who understands that comfort is a repeating act. How was your speech? He asked. Short, she said. Honest, he nodded. Mine too. Sophia woke from her nap and announced the fact with a sound that was almost a word and almost a laugh. Ethan lifted her and let the weight of his child reorder his priorities again. The way gravity recalibrates a room when a piano is moved to the center. They ate early, pasta, green beans, a pair split 3 ways. Margaret took the seat nearest, the high chair and learned the handoff choreography of spoon to mouth without making a meeting of it. When Sophia looked to Maya for permission, Margaret caught the glance and added her own small nod. Go on, practice disguised as a gesture. Evening laid its hand on the windows. Outside, the oaks lifted their dark shoulders against a sky the color of a promise kept. Inside, the baby monitor hummed its quiet weather. The house had never been safer, not because every danger had been removed, but because the people inside had learned how to meet one with each other. At 7, Ethan's phone buzzed with the formalities, protective order issued, subject processed, detective will brief you in the morning. He read each line, then set the device down as if not to jostle the good. Maya stood at the sink, sleeves pushed to her elbows, water running in the useful cadence of rinsed plates. She looked over her shoulder. It won't all be over, she said, but something important has ended. Something important has begun, he answered. They didn't name it. They didn't have to. Later, after the bedtime routine had been practiced again, dim lights, 3 notes. We're safe. We're home, and the baby monitor's green dot had turned from reassuring to unremarkable. The front gate camera held steady against a soft rain. Thomas wrote the time on a card, slid it into his pocket, and walked the hallway once more, out of habit and out of love. Maya stood a moment in the doorway of the guest room that had become more sanctuary than spare space. On the dresser sat the photograph Tasha had mailed months ago of 2 girls in yellow dresses, one of the images her sister had kept safe when everything else felt breakable. Maya touched the frame once, lightly, as if confirming that memory could be kind. A bell sounded, not sharp, not alarmed. The front gate chime, 2 soft notes that meant a visitor had pressed the button and was waiting in the rain. Ethan and Thomas reached the console at the same time. The camera showed a woman alone beneath an umbrella, water beading the black fabric and falling in small silver chains. She looked up into the lens with a face that didn't borrow from any headline. And still, recognition moved through Maya's body before her mind had a word to put around it. Ethan glanced toward her. Do you know her? Maya had already started toward the door, that by the time she reached the portico, rain had turned the stone dark and the garden brighter than it had any business being at night. The woman lowered her umbrella as the gate clicked, and opened, as if lowering a shield. She was older than the photograph. Of course, they both were, but the eyes were the same. Naomi, Maya said, and her voice broke on the second syllable. The way a river breaks around a stone, it has been trying to meet again for years. Naomi took one breath, then another, then stepped forward until they were close enough to count the familiar scars time leaves when it's been both cruel and kind. She didn't reach for Maya, not yet. She asked the question a person asks when love remembers its job. Are you safe now? She said, rain softening the words, and waited for the answer on the threshold. Rain braided off the umbrella when Naomi stepped through the gate, her voice gentled by the weather. Are you safe now? Maya didn't rush the answer. She stood there under the portico, the house at her back and the garden breathing in the dark, and let the truth arrive on time. Yes, she said, now I am. Then they closed the small distance the years had made. They talked in the foyer, the way sisters do after long detours, starting with the simple edges so the hard middle could bear their weight. Naomi, who had signed her letters Tasha years ago when names felt like armor, touched the old photograph of 2 little girls in yellow dresses on the console table. I kept this, she said, even when I was angry, even when I was wrong. Maya pressed her forehead to her sister's, and answered the only way that mattered. We're home. 2 mornings later the rain gave way, and under the weeping willow they finished what the threshold had begun. They walked the slow perimeter of memory without looking for winners. Naomi spoke of nights she thought silence meant strength. Maya spoke of days she learned routine was a kind of courage. They sang the small folk melody their grandmother had once sung in a kitchen far from here, a 3-note line that had somehow crossed a country and become Sophia's lullaby. When they fell quiet, the willow kept the secret like a good friend. Weeks passed. Spring tilted the light. On a Saturday with air like clean linen, Sophia tugged both grown-ups toward the planter box they'd filled together. She took Ethan's hand in one of hers and Maya's in the other, small fingers, sure as a bridge and pointed. A green spear had lifted through the soil, bright and tender, and beside it a single leaf brown, curled honest rested where winter had finished. Sophia made her announcement the way toddlers do, with a word turned into a banner. Up, she said, and grinned as if she'd invented growth. They laughed, not because it was cute, but because it was correct. Ethan crouched. Maya did too. The 3 of them watched the sprout consider the sun. No speeches, just a shared witness. The rabbit, tucked under Sophia's arm, gave its ridiculous squeak. No one shushed it. The world beyond the planter took note and corrected itself where it could. The neighborhood blog, after a week of official replies and quiet documentation, published a short column with a headline, "Frugal and Right. Correction. We regret relying on a source whose characterization did not reflect the family's reality. We remove any suggestion of impropriety. Caregivers do essential work. We will do better by them in coverage." The paper followed the correction with a longer piece, this time reported in real daylight, profiled 3 caregivers across the city. None of them named Maya, all of them steady as metronomes. Dr. Liang's sentence ran again. "This child is well cared for. Please let her be." At the same time, the more formal machinery kept its rhythm. The court order holding distance remained in place, renewed without theatrics. Dispatch logged routine drive-bys and, increasingly, logged nothing at all. Thomas, who believed in backups the way some men believe in saints, still checked the gate feed each night and wrote the time on a small card, but the cards now lived longer in his pocket than in evidence folders. Margaret's change held. She read from Maria's journal out loud on afternoons when the house needed ballast, and the words sounded less like a relic and more like instruction. Routine is a vote for tomorrow. Noise can be proof of love. Sometimes she read the lines to Sophia in the rocker. Sometimes she read them to herself in the library, and then put the book down and went to load the dishwasher without telling anyone about her transformation. That, too, was a kind of daylight. When the announcement came, it did not come with a ribbon. The still blooming initiative opened with coffee in paper cups and a circle of chairs at the community center where Maya had spoken. The mission fit. On a single page, scholarships for caregiver training, weekly classes for parents on the quiet skills that keep a small life steady: hydration, dimming lights, the art of saying the same 2 phrases every night and meaning them. Ethan spoke, briefly, 3 sentences about his own learning curve and his gratitude. Margaret spoke once 1 sentence about guarding the right door. Then they sat down with everyone else. The first parent to stand was a young mother named Marisol, who held a toddler on her hip the way you hold something you're still amazed you get to keep. She didn't talk about fear. She talked about a bedtime that finally worked and a neighbor who offered to sit by her gate with a book. "I thought I had to be loud to be strong," she said, shrugging toward the circle. "Turns out I just had to be the same, every day." People wrote that down like it was new, because sometimes the truest things are the ones we forget to say. Maya listened more than she spoke. When it was her turn, she kept it small. "We're not here to fix anyone," she said. "We're here to practice together." She could feel Naomi's nod from 3 chairs over, and Ethan's stillness from the front row, and the child in his lap humming something that sounded suspiciously like a folk song that knew how to travel. Practice became habit. At home, the list on the refrigerator stayed taped and useful. The temperature stayed a steady 70 to 71. Applesauce kept its place. The baby monitor's green dot became background, not sentinel. When it blinked, it was mostly because Sophia had turned over and decided, with the sovereign right of toddlers, to sleep diagonally. Payoffs, big and small, found their quiet cue. The rabbit moved from crisis talisman to picnic guest. The journal moved from shrine to bookshelf. The gate camera kept a clear picture, but more often it bordered on Baringa neighbor's dog, a delivery, a friend. The front door learned a new choreography: knock, pause, welcome, not storm, wedge, resist. Even the blog's correction found a second life as a link parents forwarded to other parents with the subject line "Good note." None of this came with guarantees. That was never the promise. What changed was the way they met the days. On a Tuesday when a nap refused to happen, they dimmed the lights and lost the battle together, and none of them made it a referendum on love. On a Thursday when Ethan's former client sent a curt message about missed signatures, he replied with a cleaned-up file and a 1-line boundary: family first remains true. On a Saturday when Naomi took Sophia to the park and texted a photo of the child pointing at a fountain as if she'd discovered water, Maya wrote back a single word: up, and they both understood the joke. One evening, as the sun slid gold along the kitchen floor, Ethan found Maya at the island trimming the leaves from a small bouquet Sophia had plucked with the purposeful chaos of the very young. He set 2 glasses down, not wine, just water with lemon, and watched her for a beat longer than a boss would, and exactly as long as a man who'd stopped hiding behind efficiency should. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" he asked. Maya smiled. "At the lemons, I miss the kind that wasn't pretending to be safety." She handed him a stem. "I don't miss this noise at all." Sophia barreled in then, rabbit first. "Hair a map of the day." She reached up open-handed, and they both lifted without arranging who would go first, the kind of choreography that happens when people stop guarding credit. She placed one hand in Ethan's, one in Maya's, and tugged toward the patio. "See," she commanded, solemn with joy. They followed her out to the planter box. The sprout had made good use of the hours. It stood taller now, a touch less fragile, still green enough to be honest. Beside it, the brown leaf stayed where it was, doing the true work of the past, not vanishing, not ruling, simply telling the new thing what whether it had already survived. Sophia pointed again, as if there could be any doubt, and the rabbit squeaked its amen. They stood there until the light left the edges of things and the house called them back with the quiet we ask for at the end of good days. The routine unfolded: washcloth, pajamas, the small cup of water, the same two phrases. At the crib, Maya pressed her palm to Sophia's back for the extra breath the child always waited for. Ethan stood at the threshold and let gravity be impressive. Enough from the hallway. Margaret listened to the three-note hum, and smiled to herself at the memory of a younger woman writing in a leather book that quiet is not the same as peace. She believed her now. In the living room, Thomas wrote one last time on one last card and put it in the drawer with no special ceremony, then turned off the lamp that had become his lighthouse and went to bed. Out on the patio where the planter cooled and the sprout held its place, Ethan and Maya sat on the step. The air smelled like clean earth and lemon and something warm that had taken months to learn. They didn't speak right away. They had learned the value of letting the good finish its sentence. When he did talk, Ethan didn't make a speech. He looked toward the dark garden and said what a father says when he finally understands that leadership is a daily verb. Every day. Maya rested her shoulder against his and let the words settle the way good rain settles dust. "Still blooming," she said, and then, after a beat that held both truth and promise, and facing the next storm. Inside, the baby monitor's green dot held steady. Outside, a leaf turned in the soft air but didn't let go. The house, no longer a set or a fortress, exhaled and kept its music. And the sprout, which did not owe anyone a metaphor, rose a fraction you could not see, doing the only brave thing a new thing can do: keep going.